Hi, my name is Jeremy Lapalme, and I'm a writer on Little Guardsman.
I'm Matt Bernard. I'm a writer and game designer on Little Guardsman.
My name's Scott Christian, and I'm one of the co-directors of Little Guardsman, and I'm the narrative director. How did we all connect in the first place? Artem and I started dreaming up and designing Little Guardsman, and we started creating a vertical slice for the game. And initially I thought of you idiots as voice actors, but also because you're great comedy writers, we sort of joined forces and you did Punch Up for the vertical slice and then joined the writing team for the game, correct? Is that your recollection?
We had a lot of problems with the writing, and we said, you can't make a game like this. And we jumped in. We got hired to do voices and then joined the writing team and began the real process of creating the game, and we've been merrily skipping along ever since. When injecting comedy into something, I feel it's like adding a skip to a stone, a little bit of a bounce. The heart of comedy is surprise, discovery. So when there's humor in a game and you have these little pops of a laugh, of a joke you like, it's a little moment of, oh, discovery, a light bulb, and then so it lightens it up. It makes it effervescent in that way to go along with the game, I'll say.
What do you mean? I am dressed up. Didn't you notice my tie?
You're not wearing a tie.
Oh, darn it. Did it fall off again?
Did you tie it properly?
Lil, you know I don't know how to tie a tie.
Did you clip it on properly?
Lil, you know I don't know how to clip on a tie.
I think that the comedy in Little Guardsman is one thing. It'll be to help separate it, to keep it something different. I don't know that a lot of games use comedy. I was kind of surprised to see that, considering how close games are becoming to screenplays, that there isn't much call or there hasn't been a big surge of funny games. And I think that there was an opportunity here to take our story and use the animation behind it and to deliver comedy. Like Matt said, the surprise. These games they have surprise already built into them, and I think the comedy just acts like salt. It just adds that little extra flavor to them. And
like salt to a slug.
Like salt and stones, exactly, is what we've built here.
Comedy's role in Little Guardsman was sort of part of the plan since day one. Obviously, one of the big inspirations for Little Guardsman is Papers, Please, which is not a funny game. Like that, as one of our inspirations, this was sort of the fantasy, funny riff on Papers, Please. And obviously, you guys were brought on to tease that out. But from day one, Artem and I were thinking back to sort of being kids in the 90s watching Saturday morning cartoons, and then being a little bit older with The Simpsons, with Futurama, with South Park. So again, it's sort of the joy and wonder of cartoons, but a little bit of the edge of those cartoons not for kids.
Of course, Caboose wouldn't have been my first choice, but as you can see, I do have a rather juicy posterior, if I do say so myself.
Writing a game script rather than a sitcom or screenplay or something like that. The fact that the player can choose their own adventure versus in a typical screenplay, you're going to just go from point A to point B to point C. With the player being able to direct the narrative, it gave us so much more scope to add, like, well, you've done this, so you'll get a particularly funny or gruesome or result that evokes something, but you can kind of navigate your way through them, which for the writing team, for us, it just gives us so much more freedom to build out the world of the Sprawl and of all the other nations and kingdoms and whatnot that you'll see during the game. We could really flesh out a fuller world for it than you would in a typical sitcom or screenplay.
This was my first experience writing for a video game, and I think what was unique about writing for this game is that it was essentially a choose-your-own adventure. There were many different outcomes to different choices you could make, so it wasn't so linear. We had to write endings for possible scenarios the player may choose and then to go down the road. So that was fun to come up with multiple endings, not just one storyline for a character, but it had some branching. another aspect of writing for games rather than a movie or plot was told to us from one of our programmers at Tallow right off the bat. He kind of gave the writing team a warning that puns don't translate. And because we were always planning to have this game, accessible in different languages globally, we really had to be aware of, or at least I did, I'll speak for myself, I'm a pun lover from day one, of what puns went into the game and if they would translate and if it would make sense to a global audience.
Embarrassed to be seen with me? I'm worried someone's going to see me with a human and tell my mother.
Oh, brother.
Him too.
The types of jokes I found to be best for this medium of a video game, comedy's subjective, everyone's going to find something differently funny for different reasons, but for my money, the jokes I liked the best were when they called the player out. The character, or even Lil, the protagonist, being like, what did you do that for? Like, how could you do that? I mean, most of the times they're talking to Lil, because Lil's making the decisions, but a lot of time there's a slight nod to breaking the fourth wall to the player of how could you do that, the actual person in control. And those moments always filled me with joy, because I just kind of like, ooh, they're talking about me, not just the people in the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with Matt that some of the most joyful, funny moments are the moments that recognize the player or call out Lil. But I will say it was a tightrope walk creating it, because there are games like There Is No Game where it's like a direct conversation with the player. And our story is like we want the player to submerge in the story and feel the stakes and like they're real characters and it's a real story. So yeah, it was fun to sort of take that as far as we could without shattering the sort of integrity of the story and the character.
You keep it in a fishbowl, but sometimes the fish looks at you.
I demand you let me pass immediately. Quapla.
Uh-oh. I think I may have made a mistake.
The jokes that I felt worked best in Little Guardsman were often delivered to us by our illustrators, Hafa and Bruno. When we would write a character, an NPC, or a situation, and then get these illustrations brought back to us, we could then riff on what they looked like or how we were able to have we had a great dialogue with our illustrators to create these looks, these images, these wacky characters that I think are just big and broad enough that despite any whatever language you're playing it in, if you're not using language at all, they already set you up with such a funny, bizarre looking situation that the comedy really is able to jump off of the page, so to speak, when you see these characters who Lil has to deal with at the gate or meets in one of the many different locations throughout the sprawl. The visual comedy of it really matches our writing sensibility well, and when they go together, I think that the players are going to have a lot of fun.
It was kind of a good happy marriage of we have a written idea for a character, they show us the image of the character, and then we're like, oh, okay, this is a little bit different, but kind of in line, and especially the facial expression of the characters they drew, that really helped dictate how to proceed with a character, kind of a thing. Well, he's a dumb-looking chap, so, don't make him sound too lofty.
You're sending me to jail? I'm a children's birthday party magician!
Another challenge that I found while we were writing the game was continuing to evolve ahead of us. Like, we were moving towards our conclusion, that we knew where we were heading towards, but there were so many great opportunities that kept popping up, like, oh, we should expand this, or we should have this another world. It was almost like whack-a-mole of all these different possible directions we could go, and keeping things focused, I think, because comedy works well when it's focused and when it's specific, and when it starts to get too broad, you can diffuse it can get lost, and in screenplays you'll typically have a thing like laughs per page, LPP, to try to have a set to know how funny your product is by having a set like, okay, we need more laughs in this section or this section. Yeah. With a game of this size, trying to isolate where do things need to be funnier versus where do we need to actually have those heartfelt moments that we have that are liberally sprinkled through Little Guardsman, for those moments of like tenderness and caring, so that when the funny things happen, you care about who the funny things are happening to. So just keeping things in scope and keeping things in scale, I thought was pretty challenging.
There's a risk with Little Guardsman, sort of riffing on what you just said, where you can potentially miss a lot of jokes. I'd say if you're playing through interrogations and you're leaning on when you're in a conversation with an NPC, you get to choose whether to trust, doubt, or tease. If you are teasing constantly, you're getting a lot of good one-liners, a lot of good jokes. But if you're playing Lil and role-playing Lil in a really trusting way, you're going to sort of get a more earnest feeling. And you might just hit fewer jokes.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
It can really change the feel of the game.